Anyhow, much of what I had put together over the last month or so had to do with Ferguson. But next to nothing about Michael Brown and or Darren Wilson themselves. I kind of have taken the tract with Ferguson that I took with Trayvon Martin, and that's disconnected interest. Of course, I'm interested in what happened, but we really don't know for sure. People think they know, but they really don't. There's an informational vacuum, and in that vacuum, the propaganda machines have just taken over. They're trying to bully and drag you into their preferred echo chambers. I have no idea what happened on that street, and, to be honest, detective, neither do you. To me, it really doesn't matter. Not in the bigger picture. Because, right or wrong, I didn't know him. So to me, there are bigger stories than what happened to this individual kid, this one kid. First, the continuing catastrophic institutional failure, especially when it comes to blacks, law enforcement, and the justice system, and the relationship between the three. And, watching the news coverage, one thing that struck me was the constant, incredible level of authentic distrust. Not only by those involved directly in the shooting, but just those in the community. The distrust wasn't exactly unexpected, but it was the one thing, I think, that drove the story. The people don't trust public officials and public institutions, as though the system is rigged against them. That is something I can't understand. I've been in the court system a time or two, and I've seen cops lie. I've seen cops profile. Personally, I have my veggie bus traffic stop / drug search that we endured in Tennessee back in 2009. The probable cause that led us to sitting on the side of I-40 for 2 hours while the bus was searched by, paramilitary drug troopers. A dirty license plate. That wasn't dirty. They just said it was. That was the excuse they gave. There wasn't anything on that fucking license plate. We looked. Nothing on it. They profiled the bus. The search was one thing, but there was also bullying of one of the other passengers. Why? Because he suffered from severe anxiety. He'd been pulled over by cops, hauled out of the bus, and put on the side of the road while the bus was searched for drugs. He had an anxiety attack, and they bullied him. They said he was acting suspicious. He was acting weird. Of course he was. We had no recourse. What could we do about it? The lack of accountability. That's another thing altogether. There are completely different justice systems for the rich than there are for poor people and black people. The people in Ferguson are, of course, intimately aware of this. They've seen it over and over and over again. And details of the shooting aside, you could hear that acute awareness in their voices in the days following the shooting. I mean, they had the same extreme tone Baggy McTeabagger takes when he discusses Benghazi. It's this wild, rabid mistrust, right? Except in this case, it's justified. A lot of people may not like what I have to say, but what specifically happened to Michael Brown was as irrelevant to the protest aftermath as the convenience store video was to the shooting. What is, in my opinion, of greater relevance was the militarized response to the protests. A military response to what was, for the most part, a peaceful demonstration. Whatever vandalizing and looting was taking place in Ferguson, at least during the first few days, was isolated and certainly not taking place in the middle of Florissant Avenue, where snipers sitting atop military-grade vehicles were aiming military weaponry, lobbing tear gas at demonstrators, and arresting and intimidating American journalists. The scene in North St. Louis was something straight out of Tunisia. And again, had nothing to do with the details of the death of Michael Brown. Whatever happened to him has no bearing on how and why a militarized domestic police force moves to essentially crush a public demonstration. Over the last month, I've written volumes on the militarization of domestic law enforcement and how they've circumvented posse comitatus, or comitatus, however you pronounce it. It's the prohibition of using the military to engage in domestic law enforcement. And they've circumvented that by simply militarizing existing law enforcement. And I was writing on how that's sort of been creeping up on us for 40 years, under the guise, first, of the war on drugs, and then TWAT, the war against terror. But inevitably, while I was trying to prepare this podcast, I was always sucked into and distracted by fucktard America, to the point that, again, The propaganda has become the story. The discourse that's polluting cable news and social media is dumbfounding and revoltingly ignorant. Both conservatives and liberals went into ideological convulsions over Ferguson. No real interest in authentic truth, only twisting the limited available information in order to push their specific agendas. Discourse my ass. On the left, by God, it was perfectly obvious that Michael Brown was a nice, wholesome young man who was harassed by an evil, racist cop and executed in the street for no reason at all. But by golly, on the right, Michael Brown was clearly an aggressive thug ape who attacked one of our noble law enforcement heroes. A hero who was being attacked. And clearly, obviously, right? Well, he fired in self-defense. He even had a shattered eye socket until he didn't. Ferguson, the community itself, reacted to something that happened in the community, okay? But tribalized America reacted based on conclusions instinctively drawn from ideological preference. And the news media, doing their commercial-driven duty, simply reflected and perpetuated it, gave you the product you demanded. Much to their advertisers' glee, of course. Then there was the tribal trailer park. Social media. After a week or two, I simply checked out. Social media, television, all of it. And that started when the fascist right's Uncle Toms, the Tea Party's useful idiots, began saying things like, arresting reporters in Ferguson is no big deal because you know what? At least we ain't beheading them. Really? What the fuck is wrong with you? I ask again, what the fuck is wrong with you? ISIS is setting the standard for American exceptionalism now? Really? Here's some excerpts from some other conversations with some right-wing pseudo-fascists. This transition's been going on for years. As our society has been decaying, we are forced into a militant state. That's horseshit. Social decay, huh? Crime peaked somewhere around 1991. 23 years ago, 1991, that's when crime peaked, and it's been declining ever since. Violent crime, everything. And how many of those crimes, how much of that social decay has been due to pot-related possession charges? Huh? The guy sounded like Nixon. And no, I don't mean the Missouri governor. I mean Tricky Dick. But what really kills me is how these folks think that Obamacare is big government, unconstitutional tyranny. Take our country back. But having a de facto military force engaged in nationwide law enforcement, cleverly circumventing posse comitatus, somehow is common sense public safety. Bizarre. Here's more. Every profession has members that are just bad. Some officers do enjoy the power trip. Well, no shit. And some are truly corrupt, but I'm not sure that the entire system is broken and corrupt. It's just some of the people in it. Oh my God. How many other professionals, aside from, legitimate military, how many are armed, empowered to perform home invasions and searches and arrest people at will? Perhaps a slightly higher fucking psychological standard should be demanded than, say, from an office temp at the DMV. Again, I can't get over the irony of small government patriots who think that Obamacare is tyranny, yet a militarized police force recreating images of Iraq and Kent State is perfectly fine. If that's your idea of common sense, keep it. Okay? More on the militarized police force, I don't have a problem with it. I try to live by laws. And if you do that, you won't have an issue. Obey the law, and you won't get your ass kicked by the police. I think that works regardless of your race. That's the same argument the politicians use to legitimize the NSA and to sell the Patriot Act, which this small government guy has railed against. How does that attitude jive with that supposed rugged American independence and individualism? Conservatives who tout their maniacal love for the founding fathers, yet clearly would have been compliant, loyalist lapdogs a couple of hundred years ago. They absolutely kill me. I've read other statements like, if everyone just stopped with that racism thing, it'd all just go away, and everything would go to court and come out the way the law is supposed to do it. And my favorite, This is what happens when you don't slap a dog when it bites you. I really don't think you have to read too deeply to figure out what that means. You channel David Duke and George Wallace much? Actually, I should probably ask, do you even know who they are? Real quotes from real freedom-loving Americans. You gotta love that white conservative bubble. I could not believe the stuff that I was hearing and reading. And it was beyond just run-of-the-mill ignorance, you know? I've been hearing things that are so ridiculous and patently not only un-American, but just infantile. Almost always from self-proclaimed patriots. That they stop me in my tracks. I mean, sometimes so ridiculous and patently just false that they shock and astound me to the point of being speechless. Me, speechless. Me. Can you believe that? It's as though these thoughts have been conceived with the intention of being so stupid that when said with a straight face, they just stupefy. Literally stupefy who's ever there to hear it. Stupefy them into shocked, befuddled silence. As though the new fascist tactic is to, confound the opposition with sheer, utter, brazen, and repeated fucktardery. It's mislabeled as straight talk. And here's the kicker. This wasn't happening off in isolation somewhere. The thoughts were being repeated by different people in different places. They were getting it from somewhere. They were parroting. Same talking points, same arguments, same cheap propaganda slogans. Take your country back, sheeple. Again and again. I've gone into parroting before. It's not something that's new, but the difference here is that they've recently plunged over the cliff and into the sea of unabashed stupidity.